All right, everyone, it's Tiz. I'm back. Took a little hiatus, which is crazy because I only have 2 videos out, but whatever. It is July 6, 2019. Kawhi just signed with the LA Clippers this morning. Paul George got traded there to meet him. Basically, for all intents and purposes, this is the end of 2019 free agency. There's still a couple things out there, but for the most part, this is it. DeMarcus Cousins just signed with the Lakers. Rondo re-signed. They picked up Danny Green also. I think KCP at the same time. Quinn Cook. So basically everything that we're looking at is already done. There's still maybe a couple moves. Now they're talking about Russ is on the block. Though I don't really think any good team's going to pick him up, but I could be wrong. The best team I could see really going after him would be Miami. That'd be interesting. But outside of that, I'm thinking more like Charlotte or Orlando or something like that is, more likely landing spot for him. I still think Kevin Love is on the block too, so that could still get interesting. But who knows how long those things might take. For all intents and purposes, everything was waiting on Kawhi. Kawhi made his decision, and it's all basically done now. I think like Marcus Morris is still out there, or something like that, and he matters. But I'm not holding up a video for Marcus Morris. So here we go. Let's talk about it. I want to talk about who I think got a lot better. The overall state of the league, who the real contenders are, who's in that next phase of teams, and who's still trash. So let's talk about it. First of all, shout out Kawhi Leonard, first and foremost, for bringing balance to the force. He could have went to LA, started, a new evil empire, LeBron, Kawhi, AD, and, whoever would have filled in around there. But he didn't do that. I was hoping he was going to stay in Toronto because it looked like the league was getting to a point of like real intrigue and real parity that hasn't really existed in a while. And Kawhi could have thrown that all out the window if he just decided to go down to LA to play for the Lakers. But instead, he chose to go play for the Clippers and bring Paul George with him. Obviously, that kills OKC as a team. Although, that may not be true. Russ with Gallinari and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and still having Steven Adams, like that's still decent, right? Like they can still do something with that, but it looks like that's not going to happen. Russ is going to try to get out of there, although that contract is ridiculous. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to move that, but we'll see. For all intents and purposes, they're not a true contender anymore, I don't think. Not that they were these past years either. But now, obviously, the state of the league is such that there are, in my eyes, 10 to 12 teams that are serious contenders. When I say contenders, I mean they can actually win a ring next year. Not just like, decent playoff team. No. There are 10, anywhere from 10, maybe even up to like 15 teams that could realistically compete for a ring next year. Obviously, some have higher chances than others. But let's talk about it. So obviously, the first thing you need to talk about is just the LA Clippers. The LA Clippers are the best team in the league right now. I think that's clear. Now, it's not by such a large margin that you just can't see them losing. But I do think they're the best team right now, just top to bottom. Obviously, starting with Pat Bev, running point, locking down on defense. Pat Bev is an elite off-ball offensive guard. I think he moves around, he hits his open shots, and he can be a ball handler when need be, which is all you really need from him. I was surprised that Houston never gave him up because I felt like that was perfect for James Harden's place down. Now you're seeing they're having problems right now, playing with someone who does a little bit more than him, but that's a whole other story. We'll get to that in a second. So for the Clippers, obviously Pat Bev, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, neither of these guys need any introduction. Paul George was putting up an MVP level campaign this past season before he tore his shoulder, and obviously things went down after that. But if he can stay healthy, along with Kawhi Leonard, that's like a Jordan Pippen wing right there, right? Like both elite defenders, both elite scoring scoring wings, and guys that can play with the ball and without the ball. They can do everything. There's nothing on the court that either of these guys can't do. They're two of the, probably the best two-way players in the league. If not the best two, right up there. There's some other names you got to throw out there, like like Drew Holiday, or if we can get Gordon Hayward back to who Gordon Hayward is supposed to be, someone like that. But for the most part, or Giannis, obviously. But these are two of the top, two or three, maybe, 3 to 5 two-way players in the league, and it's going to be a monster. You have Montrez, also a defensive beast, and it could be, an elite role man to go along with the pick and roll with spot-up shooters around. They just signed Zubac back. I mean, Lou Will coming off the bench, like, come on, right? Like, this Clippers team is going to be ridiculous. They're going to be fun to watch, and they're going to be effective, right? They have guys, there are a lot of guys who they're fun to watch and all that, but when it comes down to real crunch time stuff, they're not really getting it done. These are not those guys. Like, these are the guys that you really believe in and really know that they're going to get it done when it really matters. So it's going to be fun to watch them. Keeping it in LA, obviously you got to talk about the Lakers. Now, everyone thinks that they're like a top team, and I think they have the potential to do that, but I don't like them that much. I still think that they're a contender. If they were to win the ring, I wouldn't be at all surprised. Obviously LeBron James, obviously Anthony Davis, but I think people still think this is like 2012 LeBron James, and it's not. We're going to be looking at 2020 LeBron James, coming off his first season of having real substantial injuries. Is that an outlier because he's had such a healthy career, or is that the new normal now that he's going to be going into his 35-year-old season? It's hard for me to think that it's not going to be more like the new normal with LeBron James slowing down, LeBron James getting hurt, or LeBron James needing to take load management really, really, really seriously, which I think, obviously that has an effect on how the team gels, how the team plays, and, if he's even going to be around and available and effective for playoff time. Anthony Davis, I have no such questions about. Obviously, he's always been injury prone to a degree also, but he's had a healthy past couple of seasons. This past year, he went out for a little while, but it wasn't anything crazy. It's always a risk with him, but we're not going to talk about that. Just for who he can be, he's top five. The top five in the league is moving around so much these days, but he's a top five player. Could easily win an MVP next year. So you have that, right? But as far as I'm concerned, that's about all you have, right? Like, the whole Kawhi Leonard free agency saga made it so that all of the other players the Lakers might have been going after kind of went off the board. Now they're stuck with guys like Rondo, DeMarcus Cousins coming to the Lakers now. Obviously, he played with AD. I never really liked that fit. It only happened because of injury, really. But I think when New Orleans was able to slide Niko Mirotic into that power forward spot, that's when they really got unlocked. Having two bigs on the court, one of which DeMarcus can't really guard out on the wing, I just don't know how effective that's going to be in 2019-2020 NBA. But that's just the piece, right? You have KCP. They signed Danny Green, which I think is a pretty big signing. Quinn Cook. Quinn Cook, I mean, it's decent for a backup. Obviously, he just came off playing with Golden State. He gave him some good minutes at times, but at other points, he really disappointed, which is to be expected from someone in his role at his age. But, if the Lakers have championship aspirations, they're really going to need to get a lot out of him. So let's talk about Golden State. I feel like they are still a contending team. I think people really wanted to write the Golden State obituary way too early. As far as I'm concerned, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, and another decent shooter is all you need to win a ring. That's all you need. They almost did it this year, but the reality is they just didn't have that other decent shooter. We saw it with Harrison Barnes. They were able to do it. Obviously, they had Kevin Durant there, and he's way more than just another decent shooter. So he did, above and beyond. But they don't need that. They only need a decent shooter in there to go along with Klay and Steph and that Draymond pick and roll. And now they have D'Angelo Russell. And D'Angelo Russell is obviously a guy I've seen a lot going to Brooklyn games. I'm not sure how well he's going to fit on the team. Offensively, he'll fit fine. He can shoot, he can handle the ball. If you can do those two things, you fit on Golden State just fine. The Steph Curry gravity, when Steph has the ball, leads to open shots, and the Steph Curry gravity, when Steph doesn't have the ball, leads to open shots for D'Angelo, or he can kick out to Steph. Obviously, Klay's going to be gone for a large part of the season. But if he comes back around All-Star break, I feel like they'll be fine. I also think that Clay coming back opens up opportunities to maybe deal D'Angelo, because I just defensively it's going to be a disaster. A Steph Curry, D'Angelo Russell backcourt is right up there with CJ McCollum and Dame as one of the worst defensive backcourts in the league. It's also right up there with CJ and Dame as being one of the most high-powered backcourts in the league as far as offense is concerned. So the offense, I think, is going to be fine, but that defense is just going to be terrible. Now, the Warriors were able to get Glenn Robinson III, which I think is like a pretty decent pickup for them. They were able to sign Willie Cauley-Stein, and they were able to get back Kevon Looney on a discount deal that I think was huge for them. I think they're going to be all right. I think their bench is a little bit weak. I think when Clay comes back, obviously a lot of that gets solved, and it allows them to maybe move D'Angelo, which may or may not be necessary at that time, depending on how guys like Glenn Robinson play out. But if they can maybe get a 3-and-D guy back, at the trade deadline for D'Angelo, or more likely a couple of 3-and-D guys, just someone filling the gaps, I think they'll be all right. And I think that they're still a strong contender in the West. There's not a lot of teams I'd like to pick over them. But at the same time, again, I think the West is really flat now. I think the East is fairly flat, but the West is really flat, like 1 through 6 at least. And even down lower than that, you're not dropping off that much. And so, the Warriors can get bounced, but I think they can also make a deep run, maybe even the Western Conference Finals, maybe even further. I don't see any team as being just head and shoulders above them by any real meaningful amount. So I think that the Warriors did a really good job to salvage the offseason and to be able to bounce back from the devastating injuries and really still put forth a really good contending team. So we'll see how it goes for them. So while we're on the subject of legacy teams, I feel like we got to talk about Houston. Houston is a team that's kind of been buried in the last couple of months. There's a lot of strife, a lot of, in-house political stuff going on maybe. And I feel like people are really taking that as an opportunity to bury the team, and I'm not quite sure why. They're still really good. It's still Chris Paul, still James Harden, still Eric Gordon. They still are pretty damn good. And while other teams are getting better, and obviously that affects how good they're going to be, relative to everyone else, I still think they're a very good team, and that everyone is sleeping a little bit too hard on them. They could easily come out of the West next year just as much as anyone else. They can easily get bounced too, but I think that's the refrain for everyone. I think anyone can get bounced at any point, and there are no teams that are bad that are going to make the Western Conference playoffs, and there are no teams that are so much better than anyone else that they can't lose. And Houston's just a part of that. They could slide anywhere between 2 and 6, and I wouldn't be surprised by any of it. And it just depends on if they're clicking when the playoff times really come. So we'll see how that goes. Same deal for a team like Portland. They did a lot of treading water. They made the move for Whiteside, which I don't think is a really huge move for them, to be honest. I still feel like Nurkic is probably going to get the majority of their minutes there. But it's helpful, and, they were able to get rid of guys like, Aminu and Mo Harkless, who, they've been effective in the regular season. They haven't really been able to do too much in the playoffs. So, maybe spreading those minutes around and getting that to somebody else, maybe that'll do them well. I think that this is a team that might be, part of that Kevin Love sweepstakes. That maybe that's why they even got Whiteside, because they can trade that expiring to Cleveland, and that could be useful for them maybe. But still, it's Dame, it's CJ, Nurkic coming back. They were the 3 seed last year. They were the 3 seed the year before that. They made Western Conference Finals this past season. They're still just as strong as ever. And again, while the West has gotten better on the whole, I'm not going to sleep on Portland either. They too are just as good as anyone else. So, we'll see how that goes also. Just like the Blazers, you got to talk about Portland. Portland didn't do a ton either. They brought back Millsap. They signed Jamal Murray to that extension. These are just things to keep things going. I think I think Denver is really good. I think they're still growing. I think, getting Jamal Murray back and locked down, I think is going to be big for him. I think he's going to have a really big year. I think Jokic obviously is going to have a big year. Michael Porter could be coming along also. We'll see. I know he just had a little knee injury. Who knows what that's going to do for him for the long term. But if he can be brought on, then that's just another another kick that they might need to get over the hump. They had their best year in a long time last year, and they're still really good. They're a team that's on a pretty strong upwards trajectory. So they're still strong. So that's, to me, that's 6 teams right there in the West that are actual contenders. I think any of those 6 teams could easily come out of the West. Some a little more easy than others, but there's no team in that mix where if you told me a year from now, hey, this team made it to the finals, I'd be like, nah. Like, any of them could do that. And I think that's a testament to the league. I think, front offices are being really smart and aside from a few teams that I'm not going to mention right now, everyone is, putting their teams in best positions to grow. And like I said, Kawhi is the MVP as far as I'm concerned already, just because he made it so that this next year is going to be fun. So that's 6 teams right there. And I think the teams even just below there, I'm tripping. We got to talk about Utah. All right, so I did what everyone always does, which is I forgot the Jazz, and that's criminal this year. The Jazz made moves, right? The Jazz picked up Mike Conley. They picked up Bogdanovich. They were already a really good team that I feel like people were sleeping on. But now they've got a starting 5 that can go toe-to-toe with anybody. Donovan Mitchell going into year 3, he's still got a lot to learn, but he's already shown flashes already that are obvious, right? There are things that he can do that other players in the league at his age absolutely cannot. And now, under the wing of Mike Conley, he's going to learn even more. He's going to learn how to be a little more heady. Not that, he's dumb or anything like that, but obviously Conley has that veteran savvy he's had that veteran savvy for a long time, but now, after all this time in the league, he just knows things, and he's going to be able to impart that wisdom on Donovan. I think it's going to be huge. I think bringing Bogdanovich to go, side to side with Ingles, that gives them a strong wing presence, a good 3 and 4 setup. It's not so great against the smaller teams, but I still think it's going to be really strong. Before the whole thing with Kawhi happened, I felt like the Jazz might have been the best team in the West. I think that's the Clippers now, but I still think the Jazz are right up there with anyone, and I think it's going to be tough to go through Utah this year, and I think we're going to see that. If the Jazz were to win, the number 1 seed and come out the West, I would not be surprised at all. So that's 7 teams, right? 7 teams that to me are really good. Like, not just kind of good, no, 7 teams that are really good that I could all see winning the chip this year out of the West. So now let's talk about the teams that are just below there. So if we're talking about strong Western Conference teams that aren't right on that level, you got to talk about San Antonio. San Antonio, got the 8 seed last year and pushed Denver to 7 games, and that was without DeJounte Murray. Now they got Murray back. They still have Rudy Gay. They still have DeMar DeRozan. They still have LaMarcus Aldridge. And yeah, these guys are a little bit older, but they're still really good veteran players, former All-Stars that can still get the job done. You got Derek White coming on now too. He showed out in the playoffs last year. And obviously you got Pop. And for as long as that's the case, good players around Pop, there's no way I'm writing that off either. Again, I don't see this team making it out the West, but they're going to be a strong team. No one's talking about them. Everyone's ignoring the Spurs. I think they're probably the 8th best team in the conference right now, but that doesn't mean they're going to finish 8th, right? They're the Spurs. They can go as high as 4 or 5. But the West is also so good that we might actually see the Spurs miss the playoffs this year, despite the fact that they still have a really good team. Well, we'll have to see. I think the Pelicans are really good, and depending on how good Zion actually is out of the gate, that's going to make or break their year as far as I'm concerned. I'm not so big on Zion, out the gate. I think obviously he has a ton of potential, but I think he's just lacking in a lot of NBA skills that might make his first year difficult. That doesn't mean I think he's going to be a bust or anything crazy like that. I just think he's probably going to struggle out the gate. What that means for the team, I don't know. I mean, they have a team now, right? Again, I think Drew Holiday is one of the best two-way players in the league. You got Brandon Ingram. You got Lonzo Ball. They're going to be able to do some damage, too, as long as they can stay healthy, which has always been the problem, in New Orleans. But if they can be healthy, I think that this team is strong, and they can push for an 8 seed, too. And, obviously everyone would love to see a New Orleans, LA Lakers first-round matchup or something like that. So, we can look for that. I think New Orleans is definitely going to be in the mix all year long. All right, next up, we got to talk about Sacramento. Sacramento also made really smart moves to solidify their team. And I think it's smart because, they didn't jump out the window because they shouldn't, right? Everything with Sacramento is dependent on what happens with Bagley, what happens with Fox. And they're both on the up, and they're smart to just let that happen. Now, they solidified, they re-signed Harrison Barnes to a longer-term deal, which I like. I think Harrison Barnes is a very strong, 3/4. He's not going to be an all-star, but he's more than good enough to be a strong role player on a team. By the same token, they signed Trevor Ariza, same deal. Like, you're never gonna see Trevor Ariza in the All-Star game, but you're always gonna see Trevor Ariza in the playoffs doing well. And I think that matters a lot more. As a complimentary player, as a vet, it doesn't get a whole lot better than him. They got Corey Joe. I think they made a lot of moves to just solidify themselves in a way that's just going to let Fox and Bagley take the reins and see what they can do with it. And the team's going to go as far as they do. If they snap into all-star level performance early in the season, Kings can make the playoffs and they can do damage. If they don't, if they're still just young, nice players that are coming along, they might be a year or so away. But that's fine because they have Harrison Barnes for another 3 years. They got Trevor Ariza, I think, on a 2-year deal. Corey Joe on a multi-year deal. So they have pieces to put them in position. And a little side note, that's one of the best parts about what happened this summer too, and also next summer, because next summer's free agent class isn't all that great. So this parity that we're seeing in the league right now, it seems like something that's going to be able to last at least for a couple of years, which is great because we haven't seen that in a long time. I feel like the league hasn't really had this level of parity since maybe like 2006. I want to say, like 2006, but it was different then. Like, I feel like this year it's a lot of really great teams, and that's the parity, that's the best you can have. You can have a lot of great teams that are even. That's the best possible state your league can be in. I feel like 2006 wasn't like that. I feel like you had a lot of mediocre teams, and so that was parity. I feel like that's not fun. A bunch of mediocre teams, that's trash. And you got to go back to like 94, 95 before you get to another time in NBA history where there was that kind of parity, right? You had like New York, you had Houston, you had Orlando, you had Seattle, you had Utah. You had a lot of teams that were really good, all in that pack. But even then, it's less than what you have right now. I don't know. I'm really excited for this year coming up. I feel like barring injuries, it's going to be the best NBA season we've seen maybe ever. It seems like definitely in my lifetime. But yeah, maybe ever. So that's just a little side note. All right, and last in this next group of teams, at least in the West, obviously I'm only talking about the West right now. The last in this group of teams is the Mavs. I think the Mavs had a decent summer, right? Like everyone talks about how the Mavs can't get big name players. I don't think they need one right now. I mean, I think it would have been interesting if they had gotten Kemba, but they didn't. And so they have Luka Doncic, they have KP, who I'm still big on. I know I'm in New York. I know everyone here in New York is trashing the guy. I think they're idiots for that. I think people drink the Kool-Aid, the New York radio shit around here a little bit too much. I think KP's still going to be great. And if you have two young superstars, you're kind of set. You can build around the edges, but I think that is already strong enough. Now, whether KP is going to be in top form this year, who knows? I think it was a really big deal that they signed Seth Curry. I think a point guard who can obviously shoot as well as he can, who can come off, KP pick and rolls, Luka pick and rolls, and be able to dish to, Timmy, or be able to dish to, whoever's not setting the screen between Luka and KP. I think it's going to be huge. They got Dwight Powell back. I think he's an underrated big guy. I think Dallas is going to be strong. I don't think they're strong enough to survive those shark-infested waters in the West. But I do think they're a really strong team. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people, and I think the West is a bloodbath right now. It's night in, night out. There's not a lot of places to hide. Like there's really not a lot of places to hide. Every team with the exception of Phoenix, and even Phoenix has young pieces, right? Like they might hit this year. I mean, they probably won't, but you can't sleep, right? You can't walk into Phoenix like it's easy, you know. Minnesota, I mean, same deal, right? They're not. You can't sleep on them. You still got to deal with Cat, right? You still got to deal with him. Maybe Wiggins will be not trash this year. No. But all right, Minnesota's trash. But for the most part, the West is a bloodbath top to bottom this year. Like I said, even down to Phoenix. Like Phoenix is not. They're not going to do well. But you can't just walk in there like Book's not there. You can't just walk in there like we're not moving into the next year with eight. And like you can't just walk in there like they're not a threat. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying they're good, but like they're going to be a threatening team night in and night out, even if that doesn't really translate to wins. It's still going to be something. So that's the West. I think I got all the teams. If I didn't, I might have forgot a team that's trash. I don't know. I think, OKC. I talked about them briefly. Let's talk it all the way out. Well, I mean, you can't, right? You can't because the Paul George trade just happened. They're talking about moving Russ. So I mean, there's no real point to talk about the Thunder unless we know what's going to happen with Russ. If they run a fire sale, get rid of Russ, get rid of Robertson. I mean, like what's there to talk about? So I guess let's hold off on that and see what happens. But for now, they're not a contender. I think they are in that next group of teams. You still have Russ, like you said, they picked up Gallinari in the deal. You still got Steven Adams, you still got Robertson, assuming he plays this year. I think that's still a very good team. It's not a contending team. But again, that may not even be the team that hits the court this year. So we can't really speak on that. So that's it. That's it for the West. If you're not excited for Western Conference basketball 2019, 2020, I don't know what the fuck to tell you. This is crazy. Shout out Kawhi for making it happen. Yeah, that's that. Tiz.